killed somebody today. I don't know their name or where they came from, who they loved and who loved them. All I know is this. I hurt them. It reminded me of when my father took me hunting. We were very close, my father and I. My mother died when I was 3 and he never remarried, never went to find anyone else. He used to tell me that he was content with what he had. I had always hoped to be like him. That's why it hurt to go hunting all those times. And used to scare me, seeing the deer, the rabbits, the birds, whatever we were hunting that day, just dying. Not just the psychological aspect, thinking those animals had brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers, sons and daughters. Father always said that they weren't like people. The animals didn't care. What scares me is the physical aspect of their death. The blood pouring out of the bullet wounds, the inside shone through the knife cuts as my father gutted them in front of me. He was a great hunter, my father. He never really cared for hunting until recently. But I always paid attention whenever he taught me things about hunting. He would tell me that even if I didn't like it, I might want to take my future son. So I would watch and learn from him as he tracked, killed, and prepared the animals. His most important lesson was that whenever you hunt, no matter what the game is, it's just an animal, not a deer, a rabbit, or a bird. Just an animal. It helps takes the emotional side out of hunting. It made sure that their shrieks of pain, quivers that they held on to their quickly fleeting life, didn't affect me as a child. The hunting trips took place every month beginning on my 7th birthday. And when I graduated high school and moved away for college, he would still go on those hunting trips and call me every night that he was gone. This went on until I was 25 and married, and he stopped calling as often so I could focus on the family. She was a beautiful woman, my wife. My father said that we reminded him of when he and my mother were our age, and that's how I knew I needed to marry her. I based every aspect of my family life on how my father lived. My wife was annoyed that I wanted to wait until she turned 30 to have a child, but she was still patient. She was a kind woman. I was conceived 3 months after my mother's 30th birthday. My wife had been waiting 5 years to have a child, and the night of her birthday, her patience wore thin. She demanded that we start trying to have children right away, and I obliged. I believe that marriage is about compromise, and it was about time that I started to do that more often. I regret that choice. She found out that she was pregnant the next week. I asked the doctor how far along she was, and she told me that she was just under a month. I wasn't sure how to feel about that. I loved her dearly, and I knew how much she wanted a child, but I didn't want to change my entire life plan. After some thinking, I realized that if I was to truly be like Father, she would die shortly after the child's 3rd birthday, and the chances of that happening were very slim without me taking control of the situation. I knew that I couldn't do that, however. Father would be disappointed, and I'd probably get caught and wouldn't be able to continue raising the child. So I decided that I wouldn't be able to follow the same path as my father, and was content with just having a son. And then our daughter arrived, and I was disappointed, but pretended to be happy for my wife's sake. I decided as soon as she was ready, we'd try for a son. But she was never ready. She just wanted one child, and I thought to myself, maybe she would enjoy hunting trips as much as a son would. So I helped raise her, and grew to love her as I would a son. We had named her Elizabeth, after my mother. And I remember the week leading up to her 7th birthday. They played over and over in my head. She was excited to get to our new cabin for a hunting trip. My wife didn't necessarily approve, but she said if Beth enjoyed the first trip, I could take her for each of her birthdays. I was disappointed that it couldn't be as often as Father took me, but I agreed nonetheless. The first day I received my hunting license, I showed Beth and told her that when she turned 18, we could get her one. She didn't understand what it meant, but was still excited. I missed the feeling of pure excitement that only a child could feel. On the second day, I tucked her into bed, telling her that I'd be gone to prepare the cabin for our trip. She asked how long that would be. I chuckled and told her that I'd be back for her birthday in 5 days. The third day, I had to leave before she woke up so the cabin would be ready in time. The first 2 days in the cabin were eventful, mostly consisting of making sure that the power worked and that we had enough food and water, and that my gun properly worked and had enough ammunition. The day before her birthday, I was driving back into town and my phone began ringing. It was my wife. I laughed to myself, realizing that I hadn't called home since I had left and that there was no cell signal at the cabin. My wife was probably worried sick and Beth probably wanted to talk to me. So I answered the phone. "Hey, sweetie, sorry I didn't call. I've been so wrapped up in getting everything ready." "It's Beth." My wife hardly interrupted me unless it was something important. Hearing it was about my little girl worried me even further. "Is she okay? Is she sick? What's going on?" I asked curiously. My wife's voice was shaking, which didn't help ease my worrying mind. I thought that she was just sick. But what could have happened? She didn't come home from school today. If you see her on your way home, please bring her back," she told me. I told her that I'd keep an eye out, and she hung up after thanking me. My mind was racing, but I calmed myself down, telling myself that maybe she went to a friend's house without telling her mother. When I got home, I told my wife I didn't see her, but told her not to worry too much. "Maybe she's at a friend's house. Call around and see. I'll drive around and I'll look around town," I told her. That search was like tracking an animal for hunting. I kept telling myself that so I wouldn't miss anything important. It's just like tracking an animal. An animal. It sickened me to reduce my sweet little angel to nothing but an animal, but it was necessary if I was to find her. The next day, instead of celebrating her birthday with pancakes, we went to the police station to file a missing persons report. A month later, they found her, and the man that took her. That sick animal who took Beth away from me. He and his wife said in the court case it was their monthly hunt. That is not a hunt, I thought to myself. You killed my daughter, not some unfeeling animal. I seethed with rage the entirety of the trial, while my wife sobbed. I stayed for the entirety, as I wanted to be there to see these animals, the wastes of humanity, get sentenced to death for what they did to Beth. My perfect gift from heaven. The prosecutors described it in excruciating detail how they had her for 3 weeks before they murdered her, how they tortured her, and did a myriad of other things that no person, let alone a child, should have to go through. And finally, how she was killed. And those worthless pieces of garbage were simply unfazed. They didn't regret what they did, no matter what the wife said. She said that she only did it so that way her husband wouldn't do the same to her. And that was the only thing that the jury had disagreed on. When the judge gave the husband a death sentence, I smiled. That joy quickly turned to disgust as he proceeded to give the wife a 10-year sentence. The whole experience ended my marriage. My wife lost her job and stayed at home all day. She spent most of her time in Beth's now empty room, even spending nights in there. She filed for divorce after 2 years of me not doing the same. I made some use of my law degree attempting to get the wife another trial so that I could watch her fry, just like her worthless husband. After the divorce, my now ex-wife moved out to live with her parents and took most of Beth's things. Father moved across the country to help me. He told me to stop focusing so much on getting justice for Beth. And that was the first time I remember disagreeing with him. He was wrong. He got frustrated and left the day I found out that due to overcrowding, the wife was released from prison. It hurt when he left. He told me to call him when I realized that any attempt at this point would be futile. I killed someone today. It felt just like hunting. In the years since Beth's murder, the thought of hunting sickened me, especially after hearing the monster couple that killed her use it to justify her death. But this time it helped me deal with what I did because I knew that they were a cold, unfeeling animal and nothing more. I followed her to her apartment one day after I got off work and saw her on my bus ride home. I memorized the route and the address, even her apartment number. I prepared my cabin for the aftermath. This hunt would be different. The killing would happen after I brought the game home. I felt like a murderer for a short while as I draped plastic on the walls and table, but I remembered that this is just hunting. Murderers kill people, and I was killing an animal. I bought chloroform and tools to aid in the killing. I didn't like it when the animals I hunted felt pain, but this was different. This game needed to feel pain for the hunting to feel right. I followed her into her apartment one night and sedated her, then brought her home. It was the middle of the night, and I drove 2 hours with her bound in the back seat. But she awoke earlier than expected. Upon her early awakening, I took immediate action and slammed on the brakes, causing her to roll forward onto the floor. It must have knocked her out as I didn't hear anything from her and she was unconscious as I laid her on the kitchen table. I gutted her the way that my father would gut a deer. She screamed as the knife slipped into her stomach, and then louder as I reached in and opened it. And that's when I found it. She was with child. The child was still forming, but there was one there. For a second I thought maybe that I'd sew her wound shut because of the child. But she was an animal. She didn't deserve to raise a child, especially after what they did to my child, and to the countless others. So I removed the barely developed fetus and put it in the bucket that I was planning on using to hold the guts of the deer that I'd hunt and prepare for Beth. I followed up by removing her intestines, kidneys, liver, stomach, lungs, and heart. She especially didn't need that last one. I wasn't going to eat her, and just made it easier to kill her by treating her more like another animal. That child was not. The child died so I could exact my justice upon its monster of a mother. I killed someone today, and no one will ever catch me for it. After I disposed of the body and its guts, I returned to my cabin. I made sure to clean it and ensure that there would be no way that they could trace the killing to me. But I could not get that image of the fetus from my mind. I felt regret for killing the child, like I had sunken to her level. I couldn't live with it. I went to the gun cabinet and loaded my hunting rifle. It had been untouched since I prepared it almost 3 years prior to Beth's murder. I killed someone today. I wrote a note detailing how I could not live without seeing both of Beth's killers die for their crimes. I apologized to my wife and to Father for being so cold, for making them leave. I laid the note on the kitchen table and sat in the chair across the room. I killed someone today. I put the cold metal barrel in my mouth and got the same scared feeling I would when watching an animal die back when I first went hunting. My hands began trembling, and I started thinking about how I would be able to see Beth. Tell her that the people that hurt her paid for their crimes. I killed someone today. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath in and steadied my hand. I killed someone today. I pulled the trigger and felt the bullet tear through the roof of my mouth, passing through my brain and shattering my skull as it exited. And I killed someone today.
Connor Foldman, age 40, was found dead this morning in his cabin of an apparent suicide. Police are unsure if this is related to the death of Amanda Bowman, wife of Jonathan Bowman, who had helped murder his daughter but had been released from jail 3 years ago. We will provide you with any more updates as his story develops. After the break, 6-year-old Kyle Weathers has been found dead after a month-long search, and his killers have the coldest defense.
I have a confession to make, and you're not gonna like it. It may even make you deeply angry. Some of you may even feel betrayed. Some of you may feel cheated. And I hope for my sakes that some of you will feel afraid. I hope some of you are so horrified by what I have to say that your dreams will fill with crawling dread and slithering shades. That every shadow holds unknown words of fear, and every glint of reflecting light sends you scrambling into the peace that only madness can bring. It starts as all unthinkable evils must. With an idea. Ideas are curious creatures, like a virulent plague. Ideas can seep through collective human unconsciousness at an unfathomable rate, infecting minds and twisting intentions. A network of ideas form the very core of our most immaculate champions and our most detestable monsters. Ideas corrupt, redeem, save, and damn us. And yet, as powerful and immortal as they be once spread, they are just as fragile when kept contained. The most wonderful or terrible idea of all time might die with its creator if never uttered through trembling lips. And every once in a while there's an idea that comes along that's not quite like all the others. Sometimes an artist feels like they are discovering their painted landscape rather than conjuring it. Sometimes a musician seems to pluck sonata from the very air rather than only invent it. Sometimes an idea hangs in the air like a glimmering firefly, just waiting for you to reach out and catch it. Sometimes they seem to be things with lives of their own, abstract, eldritch entities that are spawned rather than designed. So I ask you, have you ever had such an idea? I have. She loomed over my bed one night as I slept, brought to life by gnarled dreams of gorgeous darkness. I woke to her presence with a feeling that somehow transcended fear, and rolled over to gaze up in what had finally clawed its way out of my mind's abyss. I shall not attempt to describe her in much physical detail, as she would not seem to you as she would to me. She was beautiful, of course. How could she not be? But touched by wretchedness so pure it was almost divine. I had never been so horrified, and yet had also never been so truly alive, so completely inside my own flesh. Her hollowed eyes seethed with wicked, stalwart purpose. Her hair wretched her nangly and spinely form like a profane halo, and her mouth uttered blissful blasphemies. When we spoke of nothingness and void, faceless heralds, twisted games in dark forests, an evil that could corrupt the most devout of fathers, the night seemed to drag on for an age, and we spoke so many other ancient monstrosities, alien landscapes, and foul horrors that I fear my mind would shatter to recount them all. Still, I knew then as I do now that there is only one way that we would ever truly be free of my mind. Morning came after an era of twilight whispers, and I found that she had left with the moonlight. It was not long before I was convinced that it was a dream. For those long months, I had been content to hide behind that comforting fantasy. I visited friends, went to work, paid bills, and participated in mostly pleasant monotony of modern society. I even took time to write up submissions and every once in a while send them here. That is the confession that I bring to you, my friends. Not everything that I have sent is true. Have I broken the sacred rule, that inviolate decree? Yes, I admit to it, and I apologize for it. But do you not see my folly? They were my ideas. They were dark dreams and fictional phantoms. I conceived them to frighten and thrill, and so they have. Those blackened tendrils of paranoia and distress reached out to many. All of us here hunger for that, do we not? We ask for it, search for it, and want it. All I ever desired was to help fulfill that need in others, but to my great shame, I have done so much more. You see, I slept soundly right up until these last few weeks. My dark muse had been completely forgotten, and I had even begun to neglect this channel altogether. My interest in submissions had seemed to fade, and my life began a new chapter. She didn't like that. I saw it in the first 2 weeks ago as I stepped into my apartment after a long day at work. I had to stay late, and the sun had already long dipped below its horizon. I'm fortunate enough to have a studio apartment with a spacious patio marked off by 2 sliding glass doors. I glanced at the patio idly as I closed my apartment door, but it was not until the flash of headlights from the street beyond illuminated the glass that it appeared. There, lit up by the blinding white of headlights, was a shape that seized my heart and chilled my blood. It was a chaotic pattern of indescribable detail, seared onto the door as though a dragon had tried to fog up the glass. It was gnarled and wretched, etched with profane promises I can scarcely understand, much less repeat. It barred its gaping gnaw to me, a hollow sign. But it was there for only in the instant that the lights flashed across the patio doors. Once I had composed myself, I stepped closer to the glass to find that it had vanished. Naturally, I dismissed it as a trick of the light or a glitch in my brain, and returned to my normal routine. But it was not long before I realized that I could not relegate it to fantasy. Days later, I was seeing it everywhere, blasted onto car windows and glaring at me from reflected marble. My dreams were consumed by it, and I constantly had little sleep in the last few weeks. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a copy of a police report about a murdered girl and, separately, a canceled proprietary appraisal from Colorado that I put together what I had truly gotten myself into. Eventually, the sign wormed its way into everything, possessed my television and infected my browser. But by then I already knew what it meant, and I accepted it. I knew this hollow sign was only the face of things to come. 2 days later, she came to me once more and presented me with a demand. I had of course anticipated it and firmly refused. She wailed and hollowed and shrieked within instants, and yet my will held up somehow. This time the morning brought indescribable relief. She had once more fled the sun's rays, and I felt as though a malevolent burden had been lifted from my shoulders. Through an ominous omen of her coming, the hollow sign had foretold my demise I had endured. I sprang to my feet with joyous delight and set about reveling in my hard-won freedom. The birds sang my triumph in the sky, and the world seemed more vibrant and lovely than I had ever remembered it. Till I saw the hollow sign again. She came to me once more, you see, and presented her terrible demand. Each night I defied her, but each night my will faded just a little. Each night the light of my soul grew just a little dimmer, until all was extinguished, and I was left just as the hollow sign had promised I would be. Can you guess what her request was? Do you see now the importance of my words? Do you understand that my confession was a lie? Everything that I have posted or submitted allowed it to slither into your minds, and through the collective focus of fear and horror, it was made true. Spineless phantasms really do play sadistic games in the deep woods. Misery and torment truly do spread to good men's hearts. Faceless heralds come for guilty consciousness in the dead of night. We are made free through our fear, and so too are our fears set free by us. Her words were dripping with nightmare's potential, just waiting to be made whole. All she needed was a place where men's minds make everything true. Have you figured out what her request was yet? Have you realized what depraved idea our dark muse seems to make truth next? I'll give you a hint. Watch for the hollow sign. I'm a detective, and these last 7 years I've worked exclusively in homicide. In November of my first year, a new anchor from the local TV station had been murdered, and her naked body displayed in a popular park. every November since, a prominent citizen of our little community has been murdered and simply displayed in very public places. I've been working on the team working the case from the start, and though it pains me to admit it, up to this point we'd yet to come across a single clue as to whom the killer might be. After the 2nd November, the local paper dubbed the murderer the November Celebrity Killer, and then set about disparaging me and my colleagues over our inability to solve the case. Each successive year, the criticisms have grown stronger and lasted longer. In each successive year, my colleagues and I have grown more frustrated and bewildered over the fact that we'd yet to uncover a single shred of evidence related to any of the killings. Until today, I just found the following letter addressed to our police station. To whomever blah blah blah. Not being one to bury the lead, I am the November Celebrity Killer. As proof, use the enclosed key to unlock safety deposit 1616 at First National, where you will find a piece of personal property belonging to each of the 6 victims, and a key was included. I have no explanation for having done what I've done, but the burden I feel from having taken these lives has increased to the point that I, ironically I suppose, can no longer sustain. You will find my 7th and 8th victims at the return address on this letter's envelope. The 8th victim will be me, and the 7th will be my lovely wife, whom I intend to cross over with. Go in Christ. Reverend George Harrison. I've heard people talk about their blood running cold. Now I know what they meant. I heard the key in the front door, my husband returning from his errands, no doubt, one of which had been carrying the stack of mail from the foyer table to the post office, except for the one that he'd accidentally dropped on the foyer floor. It was in the den. My service revolver was upstairs, locked away in my bedroom closet. The foot of the stairs was near the front door, the door my husband had just entered. My training kept trying to kick in. My heart kept getting in the way. I stared at her from across the room. I nervously start to slowly walk towards her. My footsteps echo throughout the room and break the silence. As I get closer, I can't help but stare at her golden blonde hair that shines brightly. I finally arrive to where she is, and I confess that the love that I have for her, and that I have loved her for a long time now. A silence fills the room as soon as the words come out of my mouth. Finally, she responds. Please let me go. I don't want to be here. I promise I won't tell anyone about this. Just please, let me go. Same response as always. But I'm not worried. She'll learn to love me. He gripped the edge of his chair tightly. Trembling, he spoke. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. Go on, my child. Through the thin screen separating them, the priest could see an obscure face hanging low. So, Father, I met a girl down at the bar a while back. Her name's Valerie. You know how it goes down there, right? You slide onto the stool next to her and ask for drinks and hit her up the best way that you can. I mean, she's great. Tight body, real supple. Anyway, we were seeing each other for a month before she started to smell. Smell? It sounds rather crude. What about? Call me crazy, Father. But I've always known how to tell when a good man turns bad. It's always difficult at the start, don't get me wrong. It's like when milk just begins to sour. You don't catch the smell unless you look for it, but it always starts deep inside. A patch of rot grows right in the heart and spreads like cancer cells throughout the body. Past a certain point, the smell of decay. God, it just makes me gag. Well, son, I've never heard anything like that before. I don't know what this has to do with. I'm getting there, Father. I'm here to tell you that I killed her. This is no joking matter. Who said I was, Father? The priest looked outside the booth. The dimly lit church was empty. He was all alone. Why? Can you be sure that you're not delusional? Oh, I wish I was, Father. I was 16 when I caught a whiff of it on my dad. He always cared for us, so nice and so gentle. The smell got worse, and he nearly beat my mom to death. And I smelled it on my kind old neighbor. Won't you know it? Cops got him for doing things to little kids. It's my gift. I have to make use of it. I know I have to kill them before evil takes over and drives them to do worse. But that can't be the only way. Do you not shower yourself when you smell stink on your skin? Why won't you pluck out the weeds before the garden begins to overgrow? There's no other way, Father. I'm sorry. A muffled pop split the air in two. The priest saw the fabric at his stomach darken and burn. 2 more pops sent him falling out of his chair and to the ground. I saw you at Mass last week, Father. You were standing very close to me. Close enough to tell. But I haven't... I haven't... done anything. The priest choked, struggling to hold on to what was left of his breath. You were going to, am I wrong? The voice was now steely and cold. There's no other way.